Well, good evening and welcome to this program. This is the Limelight and my name is Tsime Apollo. Now, we are in the month of March, and to public or government officials, March is a month of declaration of wealth as a matter of accountability and show of integrity. And this is in regards to the Leadership Code Act, a law that was first introduced in Uganda in 1992, and amendments have been made, several of them, actually more than 2. And the key component of this law is the one that enforces mandatory declaration of wealth, including income, assets, and liabilities, to the Office of the Inspectorate of Government. And the law goes ahead to prescribe punishments to those public officials who do not declare, who under-declare, or who actually provide false information regarding their wealth. We have to fast-track the implementation of this law, especially as it is the month of declaration. And that is why we need to connect with Agaba Malon, and Agaba Malon is the Executive Director for Anti-Corruption Coalition Uganda. Malon Agaba, let's go straight to my first question. You will tell me what you think is the progress in implementation of the Leadership Code.
Yeah, thank you very much. I'm glad to be here. I think one, like you rightly, Leadership Code Act was first introduced in 1992. Then we had amended in 2002, in 2017, and then in 2021. So in terms of the progress made, I think declarations have been made already yesterday, because each and every in Uganda is supposed to declare within 3 months after assuming office, and thereafter every 2 years in the month of March. So more than 85% of the leaders have been declaring their wealth, and also because we had gaps in terms of the law. The amendment in 2017 introduced what we call the Leadership Code Tribunal. It is the tribunal that is responsible with trying breaches to the Leadership Code Act, and so far it has already started listening to the breaches and has already given conclusions and rulings in terms of the breaches. So that's what I can say in terms of the achievements and progress so far.
Okay, let's talk about again the implementation progress. Leave alone declarations that are made to the office of the IGG. How deep does the enforcers of this particular law go into looking at those assets which we know are either registered in the names of relatives or their siblings?
One, of course, the leaders, all the way from LC3 to the president, the different heads of political parties and civil servants are required to declare their wealth. And right now, over 300,000 leaders are expected to declare their wealth. So in terms of declaration, we have been doing well, and the IGG has been receiving these declarations. But where we have the biggest challenge is in terms of verification. You will find that annually the IGG will receive, like I said, around 300,000 declarations, but the capacity in terms of how many declarations they can follow up is maybe 150 or 200. So it doesn't, of course, make a lot of sense for people to declare, providing their own information, but when verification is not there at all, that's a challenge. And previously, implementation of the Leadership Code was hampered by a lack of a tribunal. Because if you remember, in the case where Colonel Chalmers sued the Attorney General and the government, the court ruled that the Inspector General of Government cannot be the investigator, the prosecutor, and the judge in the same case, hence the need for the tribunal. So in the first before 2017, most of the breaches were not heard. After 2017, the breaches are being heard by the Leadership Code Tribunal. So in terms of the gaps, one is that declarations are made, but if those declarations there is no follow-up, then it doesn't serve the purpose. Secondly, this information is not available to the public, yet it should, because then the public would help in terms of verification, because they know who owns what in terms of their leaders. So that also created yet another limitation in terms of implementation. And then, of course, it also talks about behavior. Like, for instance, if you're a leader and you receive a gift, it explains in terms of how you should handle that gift. That, of course, also hasn't come out and hasn't been worked upon quite well. So I must say that the intentions of the Leadership Code Act haven't been met yet, because the intention was to track and be able to get and know illicitly acquired wealth, but this hasn't yet happened the way we expect it to happen. And probably let's wait now that we have the tribunal, but also the tribunal is also depends on the information that comes from the IGG's office. So we wait for that and see how it will go on with the tribunal.
Marlon, I'm happy you mentioned Honorable Henry Chams, who was caught up by this law, but then let off the hook by the courts of law again. Is there any other person that this law has ever, convicted? And if there isn't any, doesn't that say anything to you in any way?
One, in terms of conviction going to prison, I don't know any as yet who has been convicted and has gone to prison, because I thought that from the very start, the implementation of the law was hampered by a lack of a separate tribunal from the IGG that could try the cases. The Leadership Code Tribunal came into existence in 2017 and has just been going through the process of operationalization, and they have been able to listen and determine a few cases, maybe not more than 20, probably around 20, since they came into office, and haven't seen any conviction yet happening. So to answer your question, I don't know of any person yet who has gone to prison for breaching the Leadership Code Act.
Well, let's also look at other punishments. The law prescribes dismissal from office. It prescribes warning. It also prescribes advice or demotion in rank. Do we have any other person who has, or who do you know has ever been reprimanded or in any way?
I've been looking at the decisions of the Leadership Code Tribunal. I was looking at them some time back, and I saw they had made decisions. Most of them are caution, especially to first-time offenders. Others have been advised to pay for their loss. Like there's a case I saw where a public official gave a public vehicle, which is a public asset, to someone, and the car was destroyed through that process. And he was, of course, first of all warned, but also ordered to repair the vehicle, which was damaged. So in most cases, the recommendations I've seen are in that line, in relation to caution, in relation to making good of the damage that has happened.
Let me pick your recommendations as a lead agency in fighting corruption, Anti-Corruption Coalition Uganda. Do you think, or do you have any recommendations on what can be done to make this law much more effective?
Issue number one, leaders in Uganda don't keep the stolen assets in their names. They hide them in the names of the relatives. You saw even with the issue of Mabati, you saw it was the relatives of a minister who was saying the Mabati. So in a system where people can easily hide assets in the names of their spouses, children and relatives, then such a law may not work. So the recommendation there is that leaders should also declare assets, incomes and liabilities of their relatives to check and see whether they tally with their known sources of income. Issue number 2, declaration should be made public. I was recently watching the vetting of cabinet secretaries in Kenya, and they were declaring what they own in terms of their worth. So the IGG should make this information available to the public, and it's the people who will help in terms of verification. Number 3, the IGG should include the budget for verification. It's quite important, because if 300,000 people are declaring the assets, liabilities, and yet you're only verifying 150, then it doesn't serve the purpose it's set out to do. But also I think the whole issue of lifestyle audit, if it can be implemented by the IGG, it would help, because when the assets are hidden, then the only other indicator you could have is through the lifestyles of the leaders. I think if that one also came on board, it would help in that regard. But also I think we need more support to the Leadership Code Tribunal. Since it is handling breaches, I think it needs more support in terms of resources to be able to handle the breaches to the Leadership Code Act. But also think the move in 2021 to increase the number of people liable for declaration wasn't a wise one, because now if you're requiring LC3 chairpersons, you're requiring counselors, you're requiring head teachers to declare, and yet you couldn't even verify when you had a fewer people declaring, then it doesn't really serve the purpose of the whole process of declaration. And then also probably the other issue we could look at is the whole issue of coordination across agencies, because you'll find that maybe the IG or the Leadership Code Tribunal are doing their own investigations, but when they could collaborate with other agencies of government, like for instance collaborations with banks to know how much money these people own in banks, collaborations with URSB to know whether they own companies and the number of shares they have there. You need maybe collaborations with the lands office to know how much land they own, collaborations with the utility service providers, because sometimes they have properties and they have accounts and meter numbers. So there's need for collaboration across government agencies to track the properties and know what exactly the different service public servants own.
Marlon, thank you so much for your time, but the key word I picked from your submission is that possibly this law is not making substantial progress in its implementation. Thank you so much for your time. Marlon Agaba is the Executive Director for Anti-Corruption Coalition Uganda, one of those key and leading agencies in fighting corruption in Uganda. My name is Simapolo. Limelight will be back next Friday, but we've been looking at the Leadership Code Act. It's time for public officers to declare their wealth, incomes, liabilities, and assets. And if you don't do that, you may be caught up by the wrath of the law. Good evening and a good weekend.